Is it possible that a magazine, a printed object often regarded as nothing more than a nostalgic artifact in the digital age, could become a silent witness to the displacement of a major power in the global industry? This question sounds exaggerated, even provocative, until the moment when the clock's hand had barely moved. Sold-out notifications appeared simultaneously, and one name echoed without rival: Jungkook. At that moment, the fashion world suddenly fell silent, as if realizing that something far greater than mere magazine sales had just taken place. ELLE Japan Spring 2026 Special Edition sold out within minutes, and behind the euphoria, a growing whisper emerged. Who had just been pushed aside? There was no official announcement. No press conference mentioned another name, nor was there any statement declaring that an era had ended. Yet the fashion world is not a stage that always speaks in words. It often conveys messages through absence, through striking silence, through a single face that dominates a space once meant to be shared. When ELLE Japan officially announced the Spring 2026 Special Edition with Jungkook as the center of its editorial universe, many assumed it was merely another extension of the common celebrity fashion magazine collaboration. However, the reality on the ground moved far more wildly than expected. Pre-orders at major retailers such as HMV and Books sold out before some prospective buyers even managed to complete their payment, while the Yes24 platform displayed the magazine as the #1 real-time bestseller, surpassing other releases that had previously dominated the same category. To this point, the question began to shift. It was no longer how well does Jungkook sell, but rather what are the consequences of this phenomenon for the long-established structures of power? The fashion world lives on a fragile balance between exclusivity and the rotation of faces. There are names that for years have been considered safe, unshakable, almost permanent within the orbit of Japanese and global high fashion. Yet when ELLE Japan dedicated a full 32 pages to a single figure, arranging him not merely as a model or guest star, but as the central narrative absorbing all visual, editorial, and emotional attention, that balance felt altered. Without a single word uttering replacement, the stage had been rearranged. Jungkook is not a newcomer who simply happened to get lucky. His track record as a figure who consistently triggers sold-outs has long been documented, both in the music industry and in products associated with him. Yet the fashion world has its own logic, often more conservative and layered with symbolism. Therefore, when the hashtag #JUNGKOOKXNLBUTY began spreading rapidly across social media, linking this ELLE Japan edition with a luxury beauty collaboration, speculation immediately expanded beyond sales figures. The teaser photo featuring Jungkook reclining in a bathtub wearing cream satin attire, executed with ELLE's signature elegant and artistic aesthetic, was not only praised for its beauty but also read as a visual statement. This is not merely a cover face. This is a new axis. Army's reaction flooding the pre-orders was certainly predictable, but the scale and speed created a psychological impact of its own. Within minutes, stock was gone. Within the same hour, social media filled with comments celebrating Jungkook's cross-category dominance. See, when your impact is not limited to a certain category, music or not, you always dominate, wrote one ex-user, while another asserted, from music to magazines, his impact is truly unmatched. These sentences may sound like ordinary praise, but read more deeply, they contain an acknowledgement that old boundaries have collapsed. Music is no longer the only arena, and fashion no longer stands as an enclosed kingdom. The term sold-out King Jungkook resurfaced, not as an empty nickname but as a cultural diagnosis. Every time his name is attached to a product, market response seems to move automatically, without pause for reflection. Yet it is precisely here that a controversial side emerges, one rarely discussed openly. In a system dependent on the rotation of attention, the absolute dominance of a single figure has the potential to cast long shadows. When one magazine edition becomes a must-have collectible that drains purchasing power and public attention, the space for other figures inevitably narrows. No one is officially pushed aside, but someone is no longer seen, no longer talked about, no longer present in the main conversation. As the first K-pop artist to become a global ambassador for a luxury fashion brand such as Chanel, Jungkook has long operated at the intersection of music, fashion, and pop culture. Yet ELLE Japan Spring 2026 Special Edition marks something different. This is not merely an expansion of influence but a consolidation. The Japanese editorial world, known for its selectiveness and careful symbolic calculations, appears to have made a clear choice. This edition was not designed as an experiment, but as a firm statement about who now holds the magnet of attention. In this context, the question of who was displaced does not require a name. It is enough to observe who is absent from the spotlight. For some observers, this phenomenon is simply natural proof of market dynamics. Unstoppable popularity, they say, naturally dominates space. Yet for others, an underlying unease remains. If a single figure can absorb so much symbolic space, does the industry still allow room for diversity of faces and narratives? Is this the beginning of an era in which one name alone can move an entire ecosystem, while others become mere background? ELLE Japan has released no statement beyond official information regarding the January 28, 2026 release and an advisory for prospective buyers to monitor official retailers such as Yes24 or their website due to limited stock. However, the institution's silence only strengthens the aura of mystery. In a world that usually rushes to clarify, silence often speaks louder. It creates room for speculation, interpretation, and the narrative that a shift has occurred without ceremony. Ultimately, this is not about who lost, but about how a victory can permanently alter the landscape. Jungkook once again proves his unmatched popularity, merging music, fashion, and pop culture into a single magnetic package. Yet alongside that, a question lingers, refusing to fade. When one name commands all the light, whose shadow now stretches behind it? And if someone truly has been displaced, did they realize it at the very moment when the first sold-out notification appeared on the screen? After the euphoria of sold out within minutes subsided, a strange silence emerged across timelines, editorial rooms, and even within the inner circles of the fashion industry itself. A silence not caused by the absence of reaction, but by an excess of things that wanted to be said while none dared to be voiced openly. The fashion world is accustomed to concealing conflict behind editorial smiles and artistic praise, yet the ELLE Japan Jungkook edition felt far too significant to be absorbed as an ordinary success. The question began to shift, becoming sharper and more personal. Was this merely a phenomenon driven by a massive fanbase? Or was it a sign that the traditional allure of long-established fashion icons was starting to lose its resonance? In the days following the closure of pre-orders, public attention was almost entirely absorbed by a single name. Articles, social media posts, and cross-platform discussions revolved within the same orbit. Even when media outlets attempted to connect the context to other figures or broader trends, the narrative inevitably returned to the same focal point: Jungkook. This was no longer about collaboration, but about symbolic dominance. It was here that the trail of silence became meaningful. Typically, major moments in fashion are followed by the emergence of other faces as a counterbalance, whether through interviews, supplementary editorials, or parallel campaigns. This time, however, that space felt empty. No other figure suddenly seized attention in response. No counter-narrative proved strong enough to divert the focus. For an industry that survives on cycles of shifting spotlights, this condition felt unsettling, as though a single event had absorbed too much oxygen. Observers accustomed to reading long-term trends began discussing what they called the passive displacement effect. Not a displacement that is announced, but one that occurs implicitly when public attention becomes extremely concentrated. In this context, Jungkook did nothing other than appear and be himself, yet the impact was systemic. When ELLE Japan chose to dedicate an entire issue to a single figure, that editorial decision automatically became a signal to the industry. This is the face deemed most relevant to represent the current zeitgeist. Signals of this kind are rarely mistaken, but they always carry consequences. The association with Chanel Beauty further reinforced this perception. Chanel is not merely a brand. It is a symbol of continuity, heritage, and upper-tier legitimacy. When the hashtag #JUNGKOKXNLBY spread, and was met with widespread enthusiasm, the relationship between Jungkook and the luxury fashion world no longer appeared as a cross-industry experiment, but as a long-term strategic partnership. Within such a structure, Other figures who had previously occupied similar spaces began to appear less central, even though no statement explicitly named them. The emotional reaction of fans also played a crucial role. ARMY celebrated this achievement not simply as an idol's victory, but as a form of collective validation. Every sales figure, every screenshot of sold out, was reshared like a symbolic trophy. In an atmosphere like this, alternative narratives struggled to survive. Even criticism drowned beneath the wave of celebration. Yet for some neutral observers, it was precisely behind the celebration that a compelling tension emerged. When a single community wields such power in moving the market, how does the industry maintain a balance between responding to demand and sustaining a broader ecosystem? There is also an emotional dimension that is rarely highlighted. For figures who have long been staples of magazine covers or fashion icons in Japan and globally, seeing an entire issue devoted to one other name, and then selling out in an almost implausible amount of time, inevitably triggers personal reflection. The fashion world seldom acknowledges feelings of competition openly, but instead stores them in the form of distance, strategic shifts, or even total silence. When certain names no longer appear in the main conversation, it often signals that the landscape has shifted. This is where the sensation of who was displaced becomes more emotional than factual. The public may not need a specific name as an answer, because what has disappeared is not a particular individual, but an old assumption that fashion dominance must be evenly distributed among many icons. Jungkook, with all his post-solo debut achievements, demonstrates that this assumption can now be challenged. He moves beyond categories, refuses to be confined to a single industry, and instead leverages the intersection of music, fashion, and pop culture to build a force that is difficult to resist in an academic context. This phenomenon can be read as an example of symbolic capital concentration. When one figure accumulates legitimacy from multiple domains at once, the effect is not merely increased popularity, but a shift in hierarchy. ELLE Japan, as a media institution, indirectly acts as an accelerator of this process. By selecting Jungkook as the center of the narrative, they are not only reporting a trend, but actively shaping it. Editorial choice becomes cultural intervention. Notably, all of this unfolds without open conflict. There are no rivalry statements, no public drama, no defensive clarifications. It is precisely the absence of drama that makes the situation feel more significant. The world watches as a major shift occurs quietly, almost elegantly, like the turning of magazine pages one by one until the reader realizes that the old story has ended. At this point, the question who was displaced may not be meant to be answered literally, but rather to be contemplated as an indicator of changing times. As limited stock continues to be monitored, as the January 28, 2026 release date draws closer, and as the euphoria has yet to fully subside, one thing becomes clear: this is not a peak, but a transition. Jungkook has positioned himself at the center of the global conversation, and the industry is adjusting to this new reality. The second chapter of this story teaches that sometimes, the most decisive events are not marked by noise, but by a sudden silence that feels too dense to ignore. So what are we actually witnessing? Is this merely the peak of a global idol's popularity? Or is it a historic moment in which the fashion industry, particularly Japanese fashion media, has indirectly established a new marker of the times? This question grows stronger as the impact left by ELLE Japan's Spring 2026 special edition becomes increasingly clear. This is no longer about selling out, nor merely about 32 exclusive pages, but about a shift in how the industry understands influence, relevance, and symbolic power. In recent years, the fashion world has frequently spoken about diversifying faces and promoting inclusivity. Yet this event reveals an intriguing paradox. Amid efforts to distribute the spotlight, a single figure has emerged who is capable of absorbing it almost entirely. Jungkook, with a combination of pop star aura, luxury legitimacy through Chanel beauty, and the driving force of a global fanbase, becomes an anomaly that is difficult to classify. He is not merely a representation of trends, but the engine of those trends themselves. When his name appears, other narratives tend to disappear, not because they are forced out, but because they lose resonance. Speculation thus moves into more sensitive territory. Is the industry, perhaps unconsciously, beginning to concentrate its symbolic investment on figures deemed the safest from a commercial standpoint? If so, what are the consequences for the long-term ecosystem? In the attention economy, the victory of one party often means a reduction of space for other forms of exploration. And even though no individual is explicitly displaced, their absence from the main conversation becomes proof that a shift has occurred. What is striking is that Jungkook himself has never positioned himself as a challenger to anyone. The narrative of displacement arises entirely from the way the world responds to his presence. Media, markets, and the public move in unison, creating a domino effect that is almost impossible to control. In this context, the sold-out ELLE Japan edition becomes more than just news. It becomes a mirror reflecting a new reality of the global creative industry, where the boundaries between celebrity, fashion icon, and cultural agent grow increasingly blurred. As the official release on January 28, 2026 approaches, one thing feels certain. This edition will be remembered not only as a must-have collectible, but as a symbol of transition. A moment when a single name proved powerful enough to redefine the map of influence without ever needing to state who had been pushed aside. And perhaps that is where the greatest surprise of this story truly lies. Not in the question of who Jungkook displaced, but in the fact that the answer never needed to be spoken at all. Behind the magazine pages that have now become highly sought-after items lies a deeper message, one that may feel unsettling to certain circles within the industry. When a single figure is able to unite music, fashion, and pop culture in one seamless breath, the old standards of how power is distributed must be re-examined. Jungkook, whether consciously or not, has become a mirror for the industry, reflecting the direction in which the future is heading. It is no longer about who can remain at the top the longest, but about who remains most relevant when change arrives at such speed. And amid all the speculation, one question continues to hover, not to be answered today, but to be contemplated. If this is indeed the beginning of a new era, who will be able to endure when the spotlight is no longer shared?